So let's get started. My name is Joyce Raimondo. I'm the education coordinator at the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center in East Hampton, New York. I'm sitting in the barn studio of Pollock and Krasner. And today we have a special celebration of Jackson's birthday. January 28th, 2022 is today. And of course, he was born in 1912. So Helen Harrison, our director, would you like to say a few words?
I want to welcome everyone. It's so nice to have such a large group here to celebrate with us. I'm sorry we can't do it in person and raise a glass to Jackson, but and of course it would be very appropriate if we could, but I hope you will all drink a toast to his memory when we get off the call or even during the call. But I just wanted to welcome everyone in person this summer. I certainly hope that you'll come to visit. We will be opening on May 5th, and we'll be having a very special exhibition of a close friend of Lee Krasner, and followed by an exhibition of a close friend of Jackson Pollock. So those will be our two summer exhibitions. And we'll also be exhibiting a beautiful little Pollock drawing from 1945 that's on loan to us from a private collection. So please come and see us. And I'm going to turn it over to Joyce. Oh, I did want to mention that when Pollock was born in 1912 in Cody, Wyoming, his first name was actually Paul. That was his given first name. Jackson was his middle name. And the family name Pollock was from his father's adopted parents. The original family name was Mccoy, but Leroy, his father, his parents died. He was adopted by a family named Pollock, and so he took their surname. And then when he married, his wife was Mrs. Pollock, and all the boys were born Pollock. But one of them in the 1930s changed his name back to the original family name Mccoy. So there are McCoys and there are Pollocks, all of whom are related. Jackson and Lee had no children, so there are nieces and nephews from his siblings. He had 4 brothers, and Lee had 5 siblings. So they are out there, and we hope that some of them will come and join us. If not today, then come and visit us. We love to have families stop by for a visit. And actually, one of our docents is a second cousin of Jackson's. So we do try to keep it in the blood. So I hope you'll enjoy this program, and thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you, Helen. So we're going to get started. We're going to do this in several parts. We're going to start off with a brief PowerPoint presentation where I'm going to give some of the key highlights of Pollock's life and work. And we're going to focus today on his achievements as an artist and celebrate his life. And we are not going to focus on his illness, his alcoholism and that sort of thing. This is really a celebration of his achievements. And we're going to hear from some people, some local people who knew him. And let's get started. Okay, good. So happy birthday, Jackson Pollock. January 28th, 1912. Pollock was born in Cody, Wyoming. And Pollock, as Helen said, had 4 older brothers, and his father was a farmer and a land surveyor. And they did move throughout the West, living in Arizona and California. And here's a picture of Jackson Pollock all the way on the right. And I have to say, I know this is maybe unprofessional. He was really cute. He was really adorable. All the boys were. And there's Stella in the center. Okay, so here's Pollock shown in his elementary school in California. He's in the middle row all the way to the left. And as you can see, I think from this photo, the way the children are dressed, Pollock came from humble beginnings. I was told that his mother always emphasized education to these boys. And it was an artistic family. Stella liked craft arts. And Pollock's brother, Charles, was also an artist. And here is Pollock in the Native American cliff dwelling. So out west, Pollock was exposed to indigenous people's art, and this was a lifelong influence on his abstract paintings. In fact, when he was in high school, he used to go to the museums and he would look through the drawers of the storage where they had all these artifacts of Navajo art. And he was also very influenced by what he called the Indian sand painters of the West, who he had seen at MoMA. He saw these sand painters dripping sand down to create the images and walking all around the image, and that later led to his drip paintings. Okay, and here are some wonderful family photos of Jackson with his father, and also pictured here in the Grand Canyon Rim. And Pollock, growing up in the West with this vast landscape, this is said to have influenced his later art, where these canvases had this feeling of openness and vastness, right? And even the property right here in the Springs, where they were living, it has a very open space to it, which I'll show you later unless it starts snowing, okay? And Jackson Pollock was known to have this cowboy persona, but it was largely a myth. It would fall into the category of storytelling rather than reality, because he didn't partake in the kinds of activities that cowboys would partake in, like horseback riding and, you know, that kind of thing, hunting. So it was more of an image and an idea rather than a reality. And as I said, Pollock went to the Manual Arts High School, but I think that one of his main education at that time was really going to the museums and looking at the Native American art. So Pollock followed his brother Charles to New York City, and Pollock studied with Thomas Hart Benton at the Art Students League. And Benton, of course, was teaching Pollock how to paint narrative paintings and scenes of American life. And they were very close. And Pollock said that Benton was a strong personality to react against. So eventually, Pollock becomes more open with his paint, more imaginative, mythological, dreamlike, tapping into his unconscious. And he starts using unusual materials. So here he is pictured with Siqueiros, the Mexican muralist, who came to New York and held workshops where he taught the students how to use industrial materials and innovative techniques, breaking away from traditional oil painting. And Pollock, of course, well, we're backtracking now. This would be an example of Benton, and on the right is Pollock's painting. So Pollock goes to this kind of American scene painting, to this. And on the left is Siqueiros. You could see the marbleizing, the spray paint. He sometimes would embed the painting with sand. And then you have Pollock's painting on the right. So you see how it becomes much more experimental and painterly. So Pollock and Lee meet each other in New York City. And what I'd like to do now, and bear with me, is I am going to play a little clip of Lee explaining where they met.
One that was painting abstractly, Gorky de Kooning's. Well, I had never heard the name Pollock, and the fact that he was in the area painting abstractly was more than I could take. So I made inquiries, got his address, went up and introduced myself and saw his work.
Did he live nearby?
A block away.
You were on 9th Street?
I was on 9th Street between Broadway and University, and it turned out he was on 8th Street between Broadway and University, but I would never heard the name.
Well, how did you meet him again? You just went to his studio?
Yeah, I knew several artists, and at one opening, I think it's a downtown gallery, someone said, you know, there's going to be this exhibition and so is going to be in it. And that was the name Pollock. And I said, where does he live? And I got an address and went up there.
And en route, you didn't even know what apartment he lived in.
Well, I got to the top floor and someone was standing in the hall and I asked and they pointed to a door and I knocked at the door.
Who was the someone in the hall?
Jackson's brother happened to be in the hallway and I asked Jackson Pollock and he pointed to a door at one end of the hall and knocked at the door and entered, introduced myself. And that was the beginning of our relationship.
I assume that was an unusual practice for someone to just come to Pollock's studio and to come unannounced.
No, I didn't know it at the time. I learned that considerably later.
Okay, so I hope you were able to hear that. And the rest, of course, is history. And Lee married, Pollock and Lee married, of course, but Lee managed Pollock's career and Pollock rose to fame. So this is what their artwork would have looked like when they were living in the city. And you can see it becomes more abstract and Pollock is letting go of the image itself, right? It becomes more about the movement, the energy, the brushstrokes, the mark making, and his deep inner life. He's letting out his unconscious. So here's a photo of Peggy Guggenheim, Pollock's art patron. And Lee negotiated a deal with Peggy that she would pay Pollock a monthly stipend and he could paint. And also Peggy lent Lee and Pollock money for the down payment on the house so they could move here to the Springs. So here's a picture of Lee and Jackson with their dog Gypsy. They had a dog named Ahab, and also Pollock was very good with pet crows, and the name of the crow was Caw Caw. So let's take a look at what the surrounding of the area in the backyard looked like during their time. So I'm going to play another little clip of Lee Krasner talking about their life in those early days, followed by Alphonse Soria.
We bought the house and it became a permanent residence, not a summer rental, and more people came out with the studio and what is now the garage and the little shed and 5 acres of land. It was $5,000. $2,000 we had to pay, and that was a loan to Peggy Guggenheim. And Jackson put up 3 paintings as collateral. Then we got the barn cleared out and moved over. He took the barn to work in, and I took the room upstairs that he had been working in. It was rough.
Well, if you want really practical details, when he moved out here, his studio had no heat in it, which immediately limited the painting life of his, the days in which he could paint to about 7 months of the year, because the rest of the time it was too damn cold. And the enamel and oil paint and he would all freeze in the barn, which was unheated, and the wind used to whistle through it.
The final afternoon of filming was a cold one. This at Thanksgiving.
Okay, we're going to stop there. So you can find that documentary on YouTube, and that documentary was from 1973, and it's just called Pollock Documentary. You can see many people speaking about Pollock, from local people to Clement Greenberg and artists and so on, okay? So eventually, of course, Pollock and Krasner's work becomes more freeform, 100% abstract art, and abstract expressionism, where it's a release of energy and a very physical act of painting. And in Pollock's case, pouring paint, dripping paint, and not even touching the canvas. What? So I'm going to take you into the barn studio where Pollock made his iconic drip paintings. And while I do that, I'm not going to do a lot of explaining. I'm going to play a recording from one of the local people speaking about Pollock and his experience observing him working. So Pollock, of course, rises to fame during his own lifetime. This is the famous Life magazine spread, "Is he the greatest living painter in the United States?" And Pollock and Lee and the other abstract expressionists really put America on the map as the art capital of the world, moving from Paris to New York City. And he creates a new language of art, right? Dripping paint. And as I said, it's a release of energy. So we're going to come back to these family photos later because we do have family members here. And we're going to hear firsthand from some of those family members. But before we do that, I want to play you this recording, which is, I think it's remarkably endearing. So I'm going to play a recording of Bob Green. He's a local man who worked with Pollock when Bob was a teenager. And Helen Harrison interviewed him. This is an audio recording. So what I'm going to do is, as the recording plays, I'm going to walk around and show you some of the property, the barn, etc. If the weather permits, I'll go outside. Okay.
This is Robert Green,
Right.
and we're speaking on October 28th, 2021. And you're going to tell me your recollections
Can you
of
hear
working
that?
for Jackson Pollock.
Yes.
How old were you?
Well, I was like probably about 14 years old at the time.
Mhm.
And Mr. Pollock met me down at one of the general stores. He was looking for a kid to work around the yard.
Yep.
It was only like 25 cents an hour.
That was good money.
Unbelievable. So anyways, yeah, you know, I'll do some work for you. So he wanted me to cut the grass. And at that time, they didn't have motors on mowers. You had to push reels.
Mhm.
So I cut his grass. And I used to split his wood for him for the winter, put it on the back porch there. And, you know, put a good sized pile there every month or so. And stuff like that, you know. And then every once in a while, he was in that little building on the left as you pull into the driveway.
Uh-huh.
And that's where he used to do his painting
Uh-huh.
that I remember.
Uh-huh.
And the basic colors were like on canvas or Homoso.
Uh-huh.
And this basic color was like a white and black,
Uh-huh.
you know. And every once in a while, I'd look in on it.
Did you go into the studio at all?
Well, yeah, I was like watching him. You know?
Uh-huh. Oh, so yeah, so you could, you didn't mind if you came in.
No, I mean, I wasn't really there long. I was just, you know, told him I was done work or whatever while he was busy. So he was a pretty nice man, believe it or not. To me, he was,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm only a kid.
Uh-huh.
So I was watching him do some of this abstract. To me, it wasn't what you call painting, you know. It wasn't very picturesque to me. It was just dribbling paint all over the place. You get up on a ladder and throw a bucket of paint around. You had all colored paints. I was oil paints at that time.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was really, it was interesting to watch him, you know. So, and then all of a sudden, he asked me, I have to go to the dump. He says, you know how to drive? I said, no, I don't know how to drive. I was only 14, you know, 12, 14. And he said, well, I'm going to teach you how to drive. I said, okay. So he had a Model A Ford, okay? And that's what I learned how to drive in.
Oh, wow. Huh.
And so I said, why? What do you got to do? Well, he'd make these paintings, right? And he would leave it in there for a couple of weeks and let it dry. And then he'd be out of sight in there, just not painting, just studying the artwork. And if it was on a 4x8 sheet of plywood or Homoso, I should say, or a canvas or whatever it was, and he would go in and bring it outside, put it on sawhorses, and they'd cut the piece out he wanted out of that, right? I don't know what it was. I don't know what he was looking for, but I did that, and he says, I said, what do you want to do with all of them? He says, we're going to take all these scraps to the dump. I go, at the time, I didn't know nothing. So, okay, I said, all right. So we loaded them in the trunk of the car. The dump is over at the ball field now, where it is now Gansett.
Oh.
The dump there. So I was driving him over. We took the stuff out because they were burning stuff at that time. Threw it over the bank, burn it up.
Well, he had rejected it, so
Yeah.
just as well.
Anyway, I never knew anything about artists, and he goes, that's good. You learn how to drive. I said, yeah, it's good. So I knew Mrs. Krasner, but I didn't really associate with her. I just said hello or whatever, and that's about it, And I goes, he's a real nice guy. He used to drink,
Yes, well, he is kind of famous for that.
Yes. And he got killed right here at the end of my road.
Right.
On the main highway.
Okay, we're going to stop there. Any questions so far? What's interesting is that Bob, I'm not going to play the whole recording because it's rather long, but Bob does say that Pollock, his creativity actually inspired him to make art, and he started making decoys. And the director told me that Bob's decoys are really quite an accomplishment artistically. So it's really sweet how Pollock, he interacted with the local people. He seemed to be very down to earth. And most of the local people who did interact with Pollock hold him in a high regard and have very fond memories. So we have a couple of questions. Yes, Bob is still alive. That was just, I think that interview was just a few months ago. And I did speak to him the other day. He gave me permission to share that. So next up, I'm going to share a recording with that. It was from a Zoom program in 2021 I did. And I was so delighted. Dan Miller, whose dad owned the Springs General Store, showed up. It was just spontaneous. And this week I got inspired to make a little video from that Zoom conversation that I had with Dan, who also knew Pollock when Dan was a teenager. Okay, so I'll do a little screen share on that one. So hold on.
Springs was a rural village 5 miles out of the center of East Hampton, and extremely different in character. We were mostly farmers and fishermen until we started becoming an artist colony. People like Jackson and Julian Levy and Koenig and a few others started settling in the area.
And what did people, these local people, what did they think of Jackson Pollock and these artists?
The only people I ever discussed him with was the house next door, just south of of his. At that time, I had 3 cousins living there, and they and my sister, when she went to visit, would tell sometimes about going over to the edge of the lot, peering through the trees and bushes, trying to see what was going on next door. So I have good memories. He was just another friend. At that time, he was, to me, the idea of celebrities hadn't occurred yet. So he was just a good friend of my dad who came in and bought some of his groceries and paints at the store. If you look on that back shelf in the studio, cans that say Pittsburgh Plate Glass or PPG came from my dad's store. Other brands came from in town, probably the local art.
Oh, let me see if we can find it. Oh, I don't know.
When we were there a few years ago, I think there was one PPG on that row of cans.
Oh, yeah, right here. Yeah. See it right there.
Yep, Pittsburgh. after he'd run up a bit of a tab, one day he brought in a painting and asked my dad if he could settle his debts with that, which he did. Sally showed you a poster of it.
Oh, and then later on, what did your dad do with that painting?
It hung in the store office for some years until my sister and I went off to college. At which time he sold it, and that pretty much helped put us through college. And I think it's now in a Paris museum somewhere.
And today, by the way, everybody, if you go to the Spring store, there's a picture of Jackson Pollock on the wall. With your dad, I take it.
Yes.
And a picture of that painting that he traded for groceries.
Right, it's the same poster this is. I found out where they got their poster and I got one like it.
Yeah, which is a remarkable story. And it also, that scene of him trading the paintings for groceries, that's also in the movie acted out by Ed Harris.
Right.
Pollock, which is a very good follow-up to this tour where he rides his bicycle over and he trades the paintings.
Yep, that he came in and asked if I would like to watch him paint.
Wow.
And when I did, I went over his studio at that time. He was doing drip. His canvas was on the floor. We climbed up to the rafters at the top where he had put a board across to hold his paints and everything. And I sat off to the side and he said, "No problem, as long as you watch and don't talk." So I watched and didn't talk while he took his cans and did his strip bit.
And what was your impression?
Well, it was interesting when I got down to look at the result. And obviously he did a bit of his work that way. The canvas was on the floor and we were 12 feet up in the rafters at the top of the garage, the studio. I guess was once a garage. And he had put a piece of plywood across the rafters to set his cans on. And I sat over on the side and he kneeled over and did his drip bit 12 feet down. I've looked at some of his pictures over the years, and there are some that if you gave it to me, I would hang in my house, and some I wouldn't. But I just look at it as something enjoyable. I don't look at it trying to interpret anything.
Okay, I love how Dan ends on that note that he doesn't try to interpret anything, which of course some people do, and that's fine. Pollock said, "I want to express my feelings rather than illustrate them." And Pollock also was very clear about the idea that he wanted the viewer to experience the painting, that there wasn't just one set way of looking at the artwork. And I think that's one of the most enjoyable things about looking at Pollock, is just you can always see it in different ways and through the eyes of different people. So let's see, I'm going to take a couple of questions. I'm going to look in the chat here. Bernice says, so where did he store his work? The studio looks small. Yeah, the studio is surprisingly small. I believe that he would sometimes roll up his canvases. Has anybody tried to excavate scraps from that dump? That dump is not still here, but we have a completely different recycling center now. Right, and Helen Harrison says that dump is a recreation ground now, but good thought on that one. And Christina says, where did you find the period photos that you included in your presentation and the copies that are mounted in the studio? And the director says, we have a large image collection and the Archives of American Art has many too. And also, if you go on the internet and Google Pollock Krasner photos, you always come up with new photos. And that leads us to our next discussion today. We actually have Jackson Pollock's relatives here with us, and they've contributed some family photos. And it's been really nice hearing about the family really from a personal viewpoint, instead of just reading about the family in a book from an art historian's viewpoint. So Jane, are you ready to come on and share a little bit, Jane?
Just a little.
Okay, don't want to put you on the spot, but let me find you and I'm going to spotlight you with me, okay? So hold on.
That's fine.
And Jane and I have spoken, and it's been really nice getting to know you. You've been so forthcoming and helpful. So this is Margaret Jane Ahrens, and you're zooming in from?
Prior Lake, Minnesota.
Okay. And could you first, Jane, tell us what your relationship to Jackson Pollock is?
Well, our mother was his second cousin. So that meant that our grandfather was a first cousin to Stella.
Mm-hmm. And how many relatives would you estimate or have sprung from that family, from Stella and Pollock's father?
I have no idea. I never count.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing genealogy since 1960, so I never count.
Okay.
So, one of the things that I would share is that Godfrey Augustus Speck is the person that we stem from, and he was supposedly from Dresden, Germany. And the interesting story that has been passed down is that he was doing his apprentice journey in Germany, and some people in the Bremen area hijacked him and ran him up the plank, and he got on a boat and and he landed in Baltimore, Maryland. Now, we don't know if that's true. We don't have any proof of that at all, but that's the story. Mm-hmm. And then he married. He was placed on the ship because the English or the British were trying to increase their support in the colonies, and that was what he did. I just saw her comment. We actually have a lot of people in the Speck family who are very creative, and some people make their living by it. But no, Jackson's brother, Charles, well, many of them were. So then when they got to Baltimore, he eventually married. He and his wife and some of the children, they walked by and carried their possessions in a wheelbarrow down to southern part of Maryland and into Virginia. And then from Virginia, they went to Ohio, to places like Bird's Run. And they always seemed to have a small farm that was never very productive. So they'd have to sell off, or they would have to move. They eventually went down to the Ohio River and then up to Fort Madison, Iowa. And they were there in about 1848. And Iowa became a state in 1846. But some relatives of ours, somewhat related, but they came to Iowa in 1836. So Iowa was a hot spot, and Iowa it was still an Indian territory when some of them arrived there. They went to West Point, Iowa, which is a short distance from Fort Madison, and then they went from there to a place south of Fairfield, Iowa, and then up to Wapello, and they moved to Ringo County, and that is where they basically stayed. Some of them stayed, and some moved on, whatever. I've been learning a lot about what Stella did. Stella actually was in Nebraska, and that's where they got married. She was a seamstress or designer, dressmaker in the 1900 census. But she obviously went back to Ringo County and got married, and the rest of it we basically know about. She returns to Iowa to care for her mother, and now Marge Carnahan and I were talking about this just before we came on, and we see something mentioned that she stayed in her brother's home in Mount Air. He owned a lumber store, and they had no plumbing at that time, and this was after 1940. So then I've learned other details about Stella, and you're going to show a picture of Stella with our grandfather, I think.
Yeah, would you like me to show it now, Jane?
Sure, show it now.
Okay, great. And you can, of course, describe whatever stories you want to as I'm showing this. So is this the one, Jane?
Yes, that's the one. And Stella is on our left as we look at the screen, and our grandfather is the one in the center. And you can tell they do look alike, and they both had let's say kind of rough complexion and skin, and really stout looking and hardworking people all the time.
Jane, do you have any stories about or feeling for Stella's character? How would you describe her? Do you have a vision of how would you picture her?
Well, as I've been reading and stories I've heard, she was a very strong woman. And she basically took care of Roy, her husband, and the boys, even though they might not have wanted her to take care of them. But she was a very strong person, and she had to be in many ways because Roy was often gone on other jobs. He had to do that to keep the family going. But it just wasn't his personality to do that. It was her personality to do things, milking the cows, hitching up the horses and going into town and those kinds of things that a man would normally do. She was doing without any problem at all. So that's one of the things. And I can see some of those characteristics in the present Speck families as well.
You can, yeah.
Yes, and I think my brother looks a lot like my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And what Marge and I decided was that this is a time when Marge and her brother Leslie, who we think is on the other side there, visited Irene, who is the woman standing at the top, Irene Crippen. And they had come up probably from Ringo County, Mount Air. And at that time, he still had the lumber store, perhaps. And they came up to visit. And you see they're all dressed up and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, what about this one?
No, they came from Germany. Oh,
was there a question in the chat, Jane?
Yes, yeah. Okay, I shouldn't do that.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. So this is Stella with all the boys?
Yes, and now, I found that among some things, but I also found it shown in one of the books that I've been looking at. And I don't know what painting that is behind there.
Yeah,
I'd
Helen
be curious
Harris.
to know.
I wonder if the director can tell us what painting is that, Helen?
It's quite long. And
I think it's arabesque. I think. Oh no, I think it's the one from the Munson Williams Proctor. It has a number. I'll look it up and I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Charles was a serious artist as well.
Yes, he was.
I've heard stories, but I don't know if they're true, that it was kind of difficult for Charles when Jackson Pollock kind of became so famous and was surpassing him.
You know,
Any thoughts?
there is a book about Charles,
Mhm.
and I didn't go down and find it in my bookcase. I wondered if I'd send it to you or not, but it is Charles Pollock, and I found it in the half price store down in Dallas, Texas, one time when we were visiting. And yes, I would say that probably he was. But I thought it was interesting in one place. They talked about his first wife, Elizabeth, said they wanted to have children and they were not going to have, she was not going to have Jackson living with them when they had their family. So they moved. And then Sandy came in and took over what Charles was doing to take care of Jackson and whatever he needed to have done. So I
Right,
thought it was interesting. And then, of course, Charles went over to Paris eventually. That's where he.
right, exactly. So it seems like Elizabeth was not thrilled that Pollock was living with
Yeah.
him, and she felt like she kind of had to take care of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now with Charles was at the Michigan State University, and he was on staff there for quite a number of years. And so I suppose that Michigan State has some of his works as well.
Well, thank you so much. This photo is remarkable, Jane.
Isn't it? That isn't, and I don't know who owns it, who had it.
You just found, did you just come across this one, or?
Well, I came across it because it was, well, I don't really know where I did find it. I've done a lot of reading it late at night this week. But it is, I saw it was published in one of the books that I was reading.
Okay. And what about, wait a minute, wrong way. Why is it, okay. Oh, this one.
I know nothing about that, but that is Jason's, now I got to think about his parents. He's a grandson, is who he is.
He is Sanford and Arloy's son, Jason, and Sandy
Yes,
is.
yes, that's right.
He changed his name back to McCoy.
Yes.
So this is Jason McCoy, who is now an art dealer in New York City. And his sister is also, her son is also involved in the business. And that's.
I tried to look him up when I was in New York City, and then I ran out of time and I didn't have a chance to.
And here they're standing in front of Lee Krasner's painting because they had a family reunion in the house here.
Yes, that's right. In the summer of 1950.
And that picture with him, with the 5 sons, that had to have been probably around that same time.
Yeah, that was from there's a whole group of them in the Archives of American Art. And you see the 5 wives as well. And there's another shot of all the boys and their wives, and then Stella with all the children. I mean, it's a charming set of family snapshots. And the painting is number 2, 1949. And it's in the Munson Williams Proctor in Ithaca, New York. Sorry, Utica, New York.
Okay.
Now, Jane, can you tell us a little bit about when you told me that story when you were in your art class and you realized you were like related to Pollock or something like that?
Yes, actually, Marge Carnahan, she was in the class ahead of me at Iowa State. It was Iowa State College at the time. And we both were required to take this art class. And, we knew he was related, but, we weren't that excited. At the time, I don't know, I didn't pay much attention to him. I don't know if Marge did or not, but it wasn't until later that I really got searching for him and so forth. And I've done that all my life.
I know, and you have those paintings behind you. Have you ever tried the drip painting technique yourself?
No.
Oh, we have to get you drip painting, Jane.
Well, yes, I should say yes, I have. I have. Above my countertop in the kitchen, I threw 8 colors of paint on the wall, and it was the enamel paint, still there. Still in excellent condition, and it's a conversational topic when anybody new comes in. And they say, "Oh, do you know him?"
It
Well,
sure,
yes, yeah.
I like that, Jane. That's
But I did it before the cupboards were put on the wall and so forth. And
that's right.
our
You have-
neighbor, our neighbors said they would peek in the window as we were building this unit and say, "Oh, what's she doing in there?" And then I used those 8 colors throughout my house. And in addition, then I have, oh, I didn't make a good copy of this, but it's kind of hard to see, but I had a canvas that I bought from a Goodwill store, and we painted,
Excuse
gave
me,
it a
Jane, can you
background.
hold it up just a tiny
Yeah.
bit? Okay. Mhm.
And we painted the background of it, and then I took that canvas out to my garage, laid down the sheet of tarp, and then when each grandchild came, they had to make their mark on this canvas. So that is my memory, my special thing related to Jackson Pollock is what the grandchildren made.
That's beautiful.
Now, in addition, they don't know this. Well, they'll know it soon. But Walmart, I took a photo of it, and I took this photo to Walmart, and they made this little puzzle. There's about 200 pieces, and it fits inside of this can. $15 for each one. And they're going to have fun remembering it because they all know that I have some contact with Jackson Pollock. So so they're going to have it. And so some of you, if you have something like that, you can do that and have fun with your grandchildren as well.
Aw, Jane, that's really beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And
Thank
I'm
you.
wondering if anyone has any questions for Jane so far. I'm going to look at the chat. So some of the questions, some we
Oh.
already answered. Helen says, yes, the other brother Sanford was also an artist. Thank you, Helen.
Mhm.
And Krista says, Charles Pollock actually has a painting at Ball State University's museum in Muncie, Indiana, or Muncie, Indiana, rather. And Lee Krasner, too. Okay, and the family came from Germany. We cleared that up.
Mhm.
Oh, and Krista says drip technique is not as easy as Pollock makes it look. Yes. And you can see Pollock drip painting. There are many videos that Hans Namath took of him doing the drip painting technique, and it was very, very methodically done.
I
yeah.
want to tell the other viewers that if you have a chance to go to the house, be sure to allow enough time to sit and contemplate what it was like in the barn where you painted. I just never felt I had enough time to sit there and visualize how he did this or how she did it.
Mhm.
And that's an experience that you want to do.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good excuse for you to come back, Jane.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I will, or not, but I want to tell you that Helen was very, very kind. And I made an appointment with her in October one year, and she took us on a tour of the house and so forth. And while we were waiting for Helen to arrive, a woman from the diplomatic corps from Lithuania, I believe that's right, and her friend from Italy were waiting there. And they were so disappointed they couldn't go in. And I said, wait a minute, let me ask Helen. And Helen graciously allowed them to join us on it. And she allowed us another couple to join us as well.
Mhm.
But he was studying how religion affected, or the part of religion in the painting process for artists. And he had an interest in Jackson Pollock.
Yeah.
And together we went to the cemetery. So
Mhm.
we had a good chat and so forth.
Yeah.
So you meet interesting people wherever you go. But Helen was very kind to do that for us
Mhm.
because it was closed by that time.
Yeah. And just as a point of information, Pollock and Krasner and many other famous artists are buried at the Green River Cemetery right down the street on Accabonac
Mhm.
Road.
Mhm.
So it's interesting to walk around there. And you see the local names with the famous artists, and you can imagine what it was like. So Nancy, would you like to share anything? You mentioned something about the mural. So why don't we get Nancy on here? So let me find you, Nancy. Would you like to share any? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Well, I just thought it was fun. Jane helped organize that we had a reunion around the Jackson Pollock mural that was going across from that one right behind her. And it was at the Des Moines Art Museum for a time, and we all gathered, and then we went to her niece's home afterwards, and everybody that wanted to could make their own drip picture, and we each have that in our homes. My daughter has it displayed on her bookcase, and I have mine displayed. I don't know where hers is. Where is yours, Jane?
I don't know where it's at either.
But it was fun. I mean, we had like 8 and 9-year-olds doing it, as well as 70-year-olds or 60-year-olds making their own Jackson Pollock art picture.
Now, prior to that, we met at the center,
right?
And their educator, I hired their educator to come in and give us a presentation. And we had about 75 relatives there. And we sat in this huge auditorium. She had these slides and everything. So some of them who had never heard of Jackson Pollock or didn't know much about it, they got an earful, really. It was, I forced them to see that first before we went to the fun part. Mm-hmm. And so I think I've accomplished something in my lifetime, that they know somebody.
Excellent. And
I would just share 2 additional things. That when we were in Tucson, Arizona, I went to the university museum gallery there and took a picture of Jackson's picture that's on display. And then I'm not sure if that's where I got it, but then I was able to get the movie on Jackson Pollock that we're going to view again now that we've been having this anniversary.
I will tell you this. If you are sincerely interested and you know that there's a Jackson Pollock at a museum, try to contact them ahead of time and see if they won't show it to you if it's not on view. And that's what happened to me at the University of Arizona. I said to the guard, "Oh, you don't have it on view," because it was in their brochure. And she said, "Well, wait a minute." So we toured the museum, and then she came back and said, "Well," with someone, and they said, "Okay, we will take you downstairs to where we store things." So they gave us the white gloves, and we put down our purses, my purse and everything, so we wouldn't touch anything else that was in storage down. And they brought the painting out from storage. So don't be afraid to ask. And what I noticed when you were showing one of the scenes inside the house, there is a masonite type board that has like a baseball diamond on it. Did you see? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'll spotlight myself so I can show them.
But that particular painting was painted on the back of one of those boards, and that's what he used.
You lost your camera, but yeah.
Yes. Okay. There you are. And he painted on the backs of those.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what the University of Arizona has, is one with painted on the other side.
Right, and this was Sandy McCoy's, Jackson Pollock's older brother, was a commercial screen printer, and this was his game company.
Okay, I was wondering where he got these. Okay.
Oh yeah, and it went out of business, so they gave Pollock and Krasner these boards, and the studio itself was covered with these boards. They had painted them white, and when Lee died, the conservators came in here in 1987 and took the boards off to reveal Pollock's floor underneath. So you do see these boards also in the house, Lee Krasner's bedroom. These boards make up the tiles. They're painted white. So it was used as material, the masonite material of the board game. Okay. So let's have a family reunion. Are there any other family members? What about
James Walker is here.
Jane, would you like to turn your camera on and say hello, or just talk to us? I'll show your photo that you emailed me. You can unmute. I don't want to put you on the spot, but
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you see me?
Yeah. No.
let me find you so I could spotlight you, okay? Bear with me, everyone. I'm the chief cook and bottle washer. Where, oh, James, nice to meet you, James. Okay, would you like me to show the photo or what would you?
Sure, go ahead and show the photo.
Okay, great. And also, can you tell us, before I do that, could you tell us what your relationship is to Jackson Pollock?
Well, Stella was my great aunt. Stella's sister, Nell, was my grandmother. And my other great aunt, Aunt Mamie, Nell lived in Grand Lake, Colorado, and Aunt Mamie, another sister of Stella's, lived in Denver.
Okay. did
And
you
the
meet them?
picture that you're going to show is my oldest brother, 1943. There it is. And they're in front of my great grandfather's. He had a market, a restaurant, and a hotel in a little town in the mountains of Colorado called Grand Lake, Colorado, right on the, it's the largest natural lake in Colorado.
And that was.
And I think Stella was there. She made a trip to Denver. And I want to say that she actually lived with my mother. My mother was in Grand Lake because of the war. My father was in the service. And my mother went up there to live with her parents.
And did you meet Stella or any of the other aunts and uncles?
We'd come in on the train before we went up to Grand Lake. We'd always have to stay at Aunt Mamie and get out of our suits and get into our Levi's.
Oh,
And then do the same thing on the way back. And like I said, Aunt Mamie lived in Denver, little house, was quite a character. She was like an elf. She was absolutely super sweet. And we'd go up and spend our summers up in this mountain town, Grand Lake. Stella taught my grandmother how to sew, how to do a lot of needlepoint work, et cetera, et cetera. My mother always talked about that.
and any other, we've discussed various aspects of Pollock, and when you grew up, did you hear stories of Pollock or anything that you want to add to the stories or discussion that stands out? Family stories?
There was a lot. The McClures actually, again, because this was a resort town, the McClures would come and some members of the McClure family would come and spend a few weeks up there. And there was always kind of a rumble about Jackson in a way. That Life magazine issue was always on a table at the end of the sofa on the second shelf. I mean, it always was there. I don't know whatever happened to it. But as a child, that issue was always there. The cabin was quite small. We actually would spend the summer in a tent. I'm the youngest of five. The baby in the picture was Stella, as my oldest brother. And he was about 10 years older than I.
What's his name, James? What was his name?
Bob.
Bob. Okay.
And he's no longer on the planet. But at any rate, he would have been 79 on the 30th of January. And
happy birthday to your brother.
Pardon?
Happy birthday to Bob.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say at the beginning of this. Has anybody said happy birthday to Jackson?
Well, we could all do that now.
Pardon?
We could do that all now.
Yeah.
So happy birthday, Jackson.
Happy birthday, Jackson.
Everybody unmute and then we will mute again. How about one big round of happy birthday?
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Jackson.
Birthday, Jackson. Oh.
Oh, I want to
So,
mention, while we're talking about family members, that in the recent years, we have been given some wonderful gifts by family members. Jerry Pollock Lighty, who is Charles and Elizabeth's daughter, has given us a lot of material that Stella created, Stella and some of her earlier family members in the McClure side, of crocheted items, things that were hand loomed by them, linsey woolsey blankets and things, and these incredible crocheted bed covers that are just so intricate. I think I would absolutely go blind doing something like this, but her craftswomanship was superb. And you can understand why the family are artistic, because she encouraged the boys to be creative. And also Jackie Pollock de Souza Costa, who is another niece, she has given us a quilt. It's really not a quilt, it's a patchwork bed cover made of wool from the suiting, where Stella made all the clothing for her boys, the suits and all of their clothing. And these were the leftover scraps. And we have that on one of the beds in the upstairs guest room. So these kinds of things are just priceless family artifacts that we're so happy to be able to showcase Stella and her gift in that way. So thank you very much, both Jerry and Jackie, for what they've given us over the years.
And I'll tell you what, I could go up there and I could show everybody what Helen was just mentioning, and we could take a look at the property. But while I'm doing that, was there anything else that you wanted to discuss or share while we walk across? James?
No, I mean, I'm a docent at the house. I live in Laurel, and I'm an artist myself. And it's just remarkable to be here.
Well, it's so nice meeting you, James. Are there any other family members or anyone else who knew Jackson Pollock who would like to say hello? Or any of maybe like Dan Miller's family? Anybody?
Okay. Yes, okay. I made contact with Nathan Zick. And he is from the Leonard and Zick Leonard and what they call, you call Nellie, but then they changed it to Martha family. And I'd like to be in contact with you, James Walker. So I'll look you up.
You know, it's interesting because every now and again, I'll get an inquiry from someone with the last name of Pollock who thinks that they're related to Jackson Pollock. But of course, Pollock was not the real family name. So unless they're actually descended from one of the four brothers, they're not related to Jackson Pollock. They might be a Walker, a Steck, you know, some of the other family members who don't have the same last name. But if they do have the last name of Pollock, they must be a child of either Sandy or Jay or Frank or Charles.
Thank you, Helen. Okay. Would anyone else like to share, or would you like to see a little bit of the house now? I'll tell you what, let's go upstairs. I will just show you briefly. We'll do a little walkthrough, okay? And then we'll see if anybody else wants to share. So, and James, thank you so much. It's so nice meeting you.
Thank you.
We're ready to sign you up for next season, James, so don't go away. I want to tell
I'll
you
be
that
there.
people absolutely love James's tour because it's being in touch with someone who's actually related to Pollock really makes a huge difference. And I think that it makes it very special for our visitors.
Well, and Jane, you talked about staying there on the property for a long time. There's something so special about being there. It's hard to put into words, really. It's just absolutely amazing. So it's a complete enjoyment for me to spend the time that I don't know if Helen enjoys me being there, I'm just
I
teasing,
I
but it's
think we'll
just,
have you, we'll ask you to come back. I think we'll
but it
force.
really is special. It's just it's just an incredible, very, very special place.
Okay, so thank you so much again. And let's go up and see if we can find Stella's quilt, okay? So I'm just gonna spotlight myself, hold on.
And I want to add that the mural that is property of the University of Iowa is supposed to be back on display in September in a new building. And I noticed some of you were referring to that University of Iowa mural.
Yeah, and we're gonna actually, Jane, you connected me with the one of the staff members there, and we
Yes.
are going to, she's gonna come on and speak about the mural in May, okay? So you'll get a notice about that, and I'll send you the information. She's gonna highlight the history of the mural, and it's a fascinating story, and it deserves its own program because there's so many twists and turns to the story of the mural. So let's see, let's find Stella's quilt. So I'm upstairs in the house, and this is the guest room. Those are Pollock and Krasner's twin beds that they slept on as a married couple, but those were originally in the master bedroom. And I believe, Helen, this is the quilt you were speaking about, right?
That's right. See, it's not actually quilted, it's pieced. And you see those little dots on it? Those are like connecting threads that hold the background, which is actually an old army blanket, to the foreground. You can see it's been through the wars. It has had its own combat. It's a little bit moth-eaten, but there's a quilt museum, I believe it's in Pennsylvania, and I wrote to them and asked them if there was a particular description for this type of bed cover, and they said it's called a hap. And I said, well, what does that mean? And they said, well, it's whatever you happen to have. So this is a hap quilt, and it was made by Stella, and it was given to Elizabeth and Charles, and then Elizabeth's daughter gave it to us.
Wow, that's actually pretty amazing.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, her granddaughter, excuse me. It was Elizabeth's granddaughter.
Yeah, that is piece of art in and of itself, really. It shows like the way she's taking these scraps, and she's bringing so much integrity to it.
Well, also, these are people who never threw anything away. I mean, they lived, they weren't poverty stricken, but they were not wealthy, and they had to reuse everything that they possibly could. And that was true for Jackson and Lee as well. They grew up during the Depression, and they were just master recyclers. And those bed covers on the bed, especially the one closest to the door, that one these were both made by Stella.
Oh, wow.
And look at how intricate that is. This is crochet work.
Oh, that's incredible. Well, everybody, I hope you come here in person to see it. It's really beautiful. So, and this, of course,
We had crochets under everything possible in the cabin.
Mhm.
this
You
is-
mean doilies and things like
The
that?
doily crochet,
Yeah,
yeah.
another thing that we have are pot holders that Stella crocheted, and in fact, Jerry has just given us 3 more. We had some in the house already that evidently she gave to Jackson and Lee.
let's find those.
No, those are in the kitchen.
I'm
Hanging
having
up
fun.
over
This is
Oh.
fun. Thank you.
It's a
Like a
treasure
treasure
hunt.
hunt. I'm learning new things. Okay, everybody, so let's find the pot holders. What's nice really when you come to the museum is it is intimate, and it's really like you're visiting them. And here, these are the pot holders, Helen?
Yep, you see the crocheted ones, the red and white, and the other 2, those were made by Stella.
It's remarkable. I think that for me, this talk is as much about Pollock as it is about Stella and about being a mother, and really the impact that a strong mother can have on her children, and how Pollock was able to rise. You might say, in a sense, it's the American dream, that he was able to rise from very humble beginnings to success, to follow his creativity, to have access to education, and to buy a home and property, and to really give this legacy of art to all of us today, that we can then take these gifts and use them as part of our own imagination and also our own strength as human beings. Okay? So
Before we sign off, I just want to say thank you to Joyce for having not only put this program together so skillfully, but also for the amazing series of programs that she has created for us on Zoom. Go to our calendar on the website and you will see that she is on a tear. She just has so many ideas. Every time she comes into the office, oh my God, no, not another idea. But it's just amazing. And it is accessible, it is fun, and it is very educational in the nicest possible way. And I hope that some of you will take advantage of them because they are free, and that you'll be able to join us again for some of these wonderful Zoom programs.
Thank you so much, Helen Harrison. And thank you to all of our guest speakers today, Jane Aarons and Nancy and James Walker, and all the people who came on to participate, and Dan Miller and Bob Green for sharing their stories, as we call them, Bonnickers from Accabonac, the local people. And it really is a pleasure hosting these Zooms. I'm very grateful. And check pkhouse.org for all the listings we have coming up. Next week, we're getting into the Valentine mode. We're going to talk about creative couples, and we're going to have John Toriano, a very accomplished artist, share his work as well. So thank you, everyone. Nice
Thank
meeting
you.
everyone.